Welcome, friends, fellow planners. It's a real high honor and privilege to be with you today. I'm Steve Iacetta, head of the Capital District Planners Association and member of Judy's past board. The Buffalo delegation unfortunately pulled out. Ellen Parker is our current president of the upstate chapter of the American Planning Association. So if you're not active in the APA yet, students, please join right up. And we've got a great active local section, CPA. CPAplanning.org. Thanks to our webmaster, Bruce Draver. On this topic of thanks, very briefly, special thanks to Chris Franklin on the GPSA. Chris, you and your team have done such an outstanding job. Chris Franklin, thank you. And are on our CPA board, and for David and Keisha, did all our lunch meetings and everything else. So the drama bills, I said, I know we all chipped in. Boy, there are a lot of tickets in here. I'd like to impose on our first elected city auditor, the City of Albany, Lee Engstrom, also our Secretary of Capital District Planners. Lee, can you come down for a moment and assure us an auditable raffle of the first book? You never can get serious about selling the great Sprawl Repair Manual by a distinguished guest before you. So Lee, yeah, step right up. Here's the high drama, drum roll, please. A moment. I want to share a very brief poem for planners while Lee's coming up here and he does his ceremonial draw. It's only about four minutes. You guys call it. Yeah, I'm going to read poems. I'm going to read poems. Bear with me. Show me not the aim without the way, for ends and means on earth are so entwined. Knowing one, you know the other two. Each path we take brings other ends in view. What do we live for if it's not to make life a little easier for each other? So there's two little bits of philosophy from the Airport Planners U. And the winning ticket is Lee Engstrom.
562-841.
Good one. The first call. So we will be selling books with personalized photographs. Table at the end of the talk tonight. As I was saying, it's a distinct high honor and privilege to join with you tonight to introduce Galina Takieva, partner with the Director of Town Planning at the distinguished firm Duani, Plater & Zybek. Students here are more familiar with the firm than I, but this is a very distinguished firm of architecture and planning based in Miami, implementing urban development, range of environments from downtown to suburban retrofits. Over 15 years experience in design and implementation around the world. Galina is bringing in international player with proven strategies for success. Takieva has led and managed scores of DPZ projects nationally and internationally. Is the author of the Sprawl Repair Manual, Island Press, July 2010, which presents a comprehensive methodology for transforming sprawl development into human-scale sustainable communities. This is a richly illustrated book, and we'll have the pleasure, if the PowerPoint works, it will work, we saw it work, with rich illustrations. Over 2 decades of experience applied a step-by-step process to design regulatory and implementation techniques for re-urbanizing and rebalancing suburbia. In 2009, Takieva received the People's Choice Award in the Reurbia competition sponsored by Dwell and Habitat for her Urban Sprawl Repair Kit. She has also contributed a number of publications, including, but not limited to, New Civic Art, Architecture, the City International, and the Charette Handbook. Takieva was born and raised in Bulgaria and can bring a wealth of knowledge from her European experiences. Received her architectural education at the University of Architecture and Civil Engineering in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, a master's degree in urban planning at the University of Miami. Almost came to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, but Miami's home base for now. Joined DPZ in '93 as project manager, serving as director of DPZ Miami office since 1998. In 2008, she became the principal and partner for the firm DPZ. Takieva has lectured widely and is the founding member of the Congress for European Urbanism, sitting on the board's director for the Center for Applied Transect Studies and the Guild Foundation, and has been certified as LEED accredited professional. Speaking internationally, as I said, how to reimagine our suburban development, new urbanism, affordable urbanism, sprawl repair, and downtown redevelopment. And we look forward to welcoming Galina Takira. Fingers crossed. So are we good? F5 maybe? There it is. Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Well, this was like a long biography. I had to shorten it. I didn't know that he's going to read such a long introduction. First, I want to thank you all for having me here on this important day, the World Planning Day. I guess it's not one of these obvious holidays or celebrations, and I have to admit that I didn't know too much about it, but thank you for introducing me to this day. I'm absolutely honored to be here on this wonderful day when you had your first snow. I'm very happy that I brought it to you from Miami. So we need probably to really celebrate it more, you know, and to make it more obvious as planners and designers. And on such a day, we have to be very optimistic and very happy. And as planners, as creators and designers of the built environment, we need to celebrate. Do we have any reasons to celebrate? This is the question. And of course, I could show you today a lot of examples of successes all around the country. Beautiful projects built by scores of planning firms around the country. And they are, you know, there will be a kind of a proof for urban redevelopment, renaissance all around the country, and many other initiatives, including suburban retrofits, infill projects, greenfield projects even of great quality. But flying in today from Miami, flying first over, you know, my place where I live, Miami, and then approaching Charlotte, and then approaching Albany, actually gave a different idea. I will try to challenge you. You know, I was looking at the endless suburban sprawl, which is engulfing, you know, Miami and Charlotte. Here, actually, in Albany, I couldn't see it. Everything was white and very beautiful from the air, so it was not so obvious. So I'm not going to talk about successes, but I will be talking about the shortcomings of our profession as planners. And I'm going to talk about basically what we can and what we need to do about these shortcomings. And of course, the title of the book cannot be more explicit. You know, sprawl repair manual. If we're going to be repairing something, this means that it's probably broken. I mean, this manual was created with a sense of urgency. We have obviously a problem. Sprawl, you know, our sprawling communities, our way of sprawling has been, this way was malfunctioning for decades. And sprawl was basically, has been underperforming for decades. But in recent years, actually in the years of the economic crisis, and kind of the mortgage meltdown actually created basically the collapse of sprawl became very, very obvious. Its failure on all levels. You know, we can start enumerating them. You know, economically, does sprawl work economically? Obviously, it does not. It is very expensive to build. We spread our infrastructure. We build. You know, far away from places. We just waste a lot of resources. Does it work? I mean, does it work environmentally? Of course, it doesn't work environmentally either. I mean, sprawl is central to our waste of land, waste of water resources, waste of natural resources. Does it work socially? Of course it doesn't. It doesn't work for the younger people, for children. You know, children cannot walk to school. In the 50s, maybe 90% of children walk to school. Today, only maybe 30%, even less. Older people, seniors, they cannot walk in sprawl. I mean, they are basically forced to be the so-called mall walkers. You know, they can go in the mall and have walks, but not basically in the physical environmental sprawl. So all of these things are showing that sprawl is really not working very well. There were some recent interesting studies in Sarasota which were quite stunning, making a comparison between one of the kind of iconic symbols of sprawl, a mall, and also a mixed-use project, kind of a walkable urbanism, comparing basically the county tax yield. And the common sense till very recently was that actually expansion and development kind of in the excerpt is good for municipalities and for towns and cities because it was bringing basically tax revenue. But what this study showed that actually the mixed-use project was with a staggering 3,500%, was showing 3,500% higher tax yield for the municipality, for the county of Sarasota than the mall. So all of these things actually show that we have a problem, that the party of sprawling actually is over and that we need to do something. We will have probably more than 100 million people actually joining us in this country, whether it's the old demographic studies are showing that in 2050, up to 2050, we'll need to house all of these, 100 million souls. And what are we going to do? How are we going to be doing it? Are we going to be? What are our options for that? Are we going to be building in greenfields in the same sprawling ways as we were doing till recently? Probably not, because it's kind of obvious that we have been learning our lessons and we're not going to repeat these mistakes. The second choice is probably to abandon what we have done and say, okay, well, we made a lot of mistakes, let's move on. Maybe we have other possibilities, we'll be redeveloping only the inner city or, things like this, and just not to worry about what is already done in sprawl. But that's also not going to help us because these 100 million people will not fit neither in our urban areas nor in even the first ring of suburbs. So we'll need to go into the second and third tier of suburbs and deal with that. We'll deal with them. So basically, the most viable third option how to resolve our demographic, economic, and all other social and environmental issues in front of us is to deal with sprawl straight on today in a very kind of aggressive manner, ambitious manner, very similar to the way sprawl actually was incentivized and was designed and was regulated and was implemented. Of course, all with good intention. Before starting, okay, if I can start, but for some reason it doesn't move. I don't know why. I wanted to show you. Well, it doesn't want to. It's a Mac. It's one of these things here. Well, it was doing it like.
We need a Macintosh volunteer. Is there anyone familiar with the Mac?
Volunteer. It was just working.
Thank you.
There we go.
If it works. Let's see if it works. Pressure's on.
Just present here. It's always the case. You guys shows up and everything works like you have bad energy. It's always telling you. Anyway, thank you. So before starting with the other things in the manual, I would like to show you another book, which is a kind of an interesting coincidence, not only in format and in graphics, and it is a coincidence because when we were designing the front cover, we were not thinking about Duxiadis, but it has a coincidence also in ideas. However, the ideas are in reverse. Many of you probably here as planning students recognize a book by Konstantinos Duxiadis, Architecture in Transition, which was written in 1963. And actually this was a book which was a very important manifesto about a transition for a traditional type of walkable and pedestrian-oriented environment towards car-oriented or auto-oriented city. He was very conscious of the conflict which was arising at this time, the conflict between the car as a means of motion and freedom, and also the conflict between pedestrians. Basically, these are two different animals, and they probably cannot exist in the same building environment. So basically, he created this manifesto about the necessity of change, a change to accommodate the car. And then, at this point, the walkable neighborhood structure was abandoned as a tool of planning. What happened is that all of his basically dreams, the interesting thing is that his dreams and the manifesto became true. This is an interesting drawing here to your right. Basically, he was describing what we have. We have narrow streets, we have, but what we need, and then on the other column he shows what we need. But we need very wide streets for heavy traffic. Then again on the right we have very small parking facilities, but what we need are large parking parcels and garages. On the right again we have very small irregular plots. On the other side, no, we need much larger parcels. Then the picturesque urbanism on the right, and then on the left, the larger intersections, interchanges, freeways, and freedom for the new design. So basically, what happened is that the transition which he was talking about happened. Now we have all around us the result of this transition from the kind of human scale environment to the auto-oriented development. And the sprawl repair manual actually does exactly the opposite. We are going back to a different from sprawl, from an auto-oriented environment to a human-oriented scale, from sprawl to complete communities. The transition which we will achieve today is basically from the fragmented and car-oriented single-use places to more compact, connected, and complex places. Here on your left, you see a kind of the omnipresent pattern of growth with the mega blocks, a kind of fragmented land use with the large commercial establishments, with the pause of segregated uses where the residential, where the commercial, nothing is connected to each other. Pedestrianism is out of question, walkability is out of question, and to the right is a community, a traditional community, all of you probably recognize Savannah, with the small blocks, with the human scale urbanism, with the public space, with its kind of complexity of the more rich urban grain. But there is a lot of, today there are of course a lot of challenges to achieve what we want to do. Okay, let's go and deal with the problem, repair it. But who's going basically to pay for that? Who's going to finance this big endeavor? Today, land is somewhat cheap if there is money to buy anything, but money is not easily achievable if nobody's lending. Money is expensive these days. So basically, all these examples and repair studies which I will show you will be difficult to even imagine that they can be achieved. But what will be Plan B? What will be the other option? I said that we don't have that many options. So basically, we have to look at some of these redevelopment options and repairs as how they can fit in the long run, how we can look at them in the kind of the longer perspective. Because what we have done so far always has been in a much shorter perspective. That's why our challenges today are tremendous. Whether it's the segregation of uses, I mean, when everything is separated, basically to weave the fabric together will be extremely challenging. The massive parking lots, which are kind of the only present depository for all of these building types, the kind of the excessive suburban requirements for parking. On one side, yes, we have a lot of land which you can redevelop in the face of these parking lots. The transportation discontinuity, there is no connectivity between our thoroughfares. You know, we have the mega blocks, but nothing connects in between. So these are tremendous challenges. How are we going to be acquiring right-of-ways? How are we going to be paying for it? You know, there are some ideas out there that some of the future transit networks may not be done on a state or federal level, but maybe private actually initiative will be needed to be able to really kind of weave together the transit system within our sprawling communities. On the other hand, the opportunities for sprawl redevelopment are tremendous. We have seen that the economics of sprawl are not working so far, but there are many things which we can do, you know, by infill, by redevelopment. Sprawl hasn't served and is not serving right now well basically the emerging markets. That's why sprawl doesn't have a future. The two largest upcoming generations, and probably you have heard this a million times in the media, and like many studies and books came out recently about the kind of convergence of the baby boomers and their basically kids, or the eco-boomers or millennials or Generation X or whatever you want to call them. Basically, sprawl doesn't serve these new emerging markets well, and we have an opportunity by retrofitting nodes within suburbia to create places for these generations to find, basically, instead of leaving the suburbs, to go back and maybe live there. The baby boomers need convenience. They will be retiring soon. In kind of one large, huge cohort, and the millennials are looking at all young people are looking for diversity, they're looking for excitement, and I'm sure that many of you are looking for the same thing. So it's very understandable that kind of the sprawling suburbs are not the most attractive for them. So this is one incredible opportunity right there. There are many other possibilities. There is a lot of infrastructure which actually can be reused, which is out there. A lot of tremendous assets have been already poured into sprawl. There are financial resources and infrastructure resources, as well as a lot of human energy, time, and even dreams. So we have to go back and look at what we have and how to deal with it. I call the book, Sprawl Repair, because, as I said, I want to really be to always distinguish between sprawl and suburbs. In America, suburbia doesn't always sound bad. Not all suburbs are equal, and sprawl is very different from the suburbs. Actually, I want to show here a kind of a short sequence on the 3 generations of suburbs in the States. There are many first-generation suburbs, especially the ones which started along transportation corridors, whether they're railroads or streetcar lines, which are still a benevolent, walkable, sustainable urbanism, with mixed uses. People couldn't walk, much further away from their train station or streetcar stop or whatever. So basically, a kind of the neighborhood structure, the walkability of the pedestrian shed was preserved. And today, it gave me a brief tour of Albany and some of your first ring neighborhoods, like Del Mar, was developed along one of the trolley lines. So these first places, you still see that the fabric is much more humane, if you wish, with the sidewalks, with the mix of uses, with the housing, with a fairly wide range of housing. So examples like, for example, here I'm showing the Forest Hills in Queens, New York. It's a suburb which is still good urbanism. The change actually happened post-war with the second generation of suburbs. Probably Levittown is kind of the preeminent example. It was kind of the first, second generation post-war suburb, where the car became the predominant tool for moving around, and basically then the neighborhood structure became became obsolete. The distances didn't matter anymore. Things could be very far away from each other because every family actually had to have a car in Levittown. You know, it came with the dream for the single family house on a small plot, but also it came always with a necessity for a car. So this is when basically everything changed. And then the third generation suburbs, or the exurbs, the so-called exurbs, which were kind of the latest generation in the 80s and 2000s. These are kind of the latest state-of-the-art suburbs. Until very recently, we thought that they are invincible. You know, some of the high concentrations of commercial development in the so-called edge cities. Some of the more glitzy and very well managed suburban communities, large gated residential developments are in this category. But this actually, in the recent meltdown, actually some of these exurban developments were very highly affected. You know, many foreclosures. Most of the foreclosures actually happened in the exurbs. If you look at the statistics from California, Florida, even North Carolina. And it's very interesting actually that this type of development continues even today. So there is certain urgency to do something, or to basically show different ideas to developers and to municipalities and say, look, let's not do what, for example, Las Vegas is doing right now. I read somewhere in the newspaper a month or two ago that they are still developing, kind of sprawl outside of the city in the far-fetched fringes, because they're saying, well, it's cheaper. It doesn't matter what's happening and what will be in the future. It's right now we can still sell these houses, and it's cheaper for us to build them this way. So the sprawl repair method actually always needs to start at the kind of the regional, the bigger picture, and to be different from the sprawling ways, which in recent years were, first in the beginning it was a kind of more or less like a federal policy, with the building construction and the interstate system, and with some of the federal tax alleviations, with the depreciation, with the accelerated depreciation, and many other incentives. Today, actually, we need to think about sprawl repair more comprehensively and start from the bigger picture. Here, within this regional map, you can see that the red dots show how we have to identify nodes within the sprawling suburbs where we can interfere. It will not be easy to do everything. It's not going to be even possible. So it will be only in special places we'll have the opportunities where location at good intersections or places where they have a potential for future transit. This can happen where there are like clusters or concentrations of employment in commercial activity. So these will be the places which are salvageable. And in your picture you can see that the red color shows also in the urban core, which also needs repair, but also the dots around, the red dots around, which ideally will be connected with transportation, with public transportation networks. And then there will be some sprawl development which will be left as is. Some of it will be probably reverting to agriculture, and there are many initiatives all around the country already called shrinking cities and other ways of calling this phenomenon, when basically big portions of these sprawling developments will be either left to revert to nature or will be converted into agricultural land. So these are the kind of the things which we need to think about. The possible ways of sprawl repair, they can be very ambitious. They can be in one shot. Here we're showing a residential development, and I will show it later in a little bit more detail. A residential development, which is a single-use, a single-family development and how it is basically repaired into a mixed-use, walkable neighborhood center, which will serve a kind of a larger suburban area. And this diagram shows three different ways of how you can achieve it. It can be in one shot if the momentum is right, if there is a developer, if there is funding, all of that. And this way is kind of more or less in the past. But there will be also ways you can do that with different phasing, with different steps, where you can start with something small, maybe converting some single-family houses into multi-family housing or senior housing, and I'll show you some of these techniques. And then another one where you have a kind of more circuitous, the third method, which is on the top of your screen, which is basically by trial, and you try and then you move forward, making sometimes mistakes, going back and forth, and then progression. The more indirect process. This is a very simple diagram showing quantitative comparison of urban indicators before and after sprawl repair. And it shows that in all cases, some of the most important indicators as infrastructure and thoroughfare length and surface is reduced when a single-use sprawl development is repaired. And how it is repaired is, of course, with higher density, actually less infrastructure, less energy, less land use per capita. So I forgot to say that in the previous diagram, you can see that on the horizontal axis we have the quality of life. In all cases, we assume that the quality of life, will be better because it will be more walkable. So the older, the younger will be served much better, and everybody will have the possibility of doing different things in their neighborhoods and not drive to everything. And the vertical axis actually shows that in terms of infrastructure, resources, energy consumption per capita actually goes down. And this is proven with some very simple calculations, which actually can be backed. And this will be kind of a next study which we'll be doing by studies and calculating carbon footprints of both, kind of the sprawl development and the new redeveloped, repaired neighborhood. And these are the two models for complete communities and the sprawl communities, and what the differences are. This is kind of the more traditional model. This happens to be a community in England, I believe, where you can see this, and our model is very, very similar, where we have the neighborhoods are delineated and are based on a kind of a walkability pedestrian shed, from its center to the edge. It's only 5-minute walk. In the center you have just your basic needs, maybe a school or a daycare. The school usually happens between two neighborhoods. They're very well connected, very fine grain of urbanism, so multiple choices for drivers. You can see also the delineation of the natural corridors are amenities for everybody, while in the second model, which is kind of the incomplete type of community, the neighborhood structure is missing, the public space is kind of unidentified, undefined, and in most cases in people's backyards. You can see that the neighborhood structure and the pedestrian shed is entirely missing. The connectivity is sparse, and this is actually the model which is legal today, and the previous model is the illegal one. That's why we will need not only great urban design technology, kind of as planners, or urban designers, we really appreciate the kind of the intricacies, sophistication of good urban design, but we'll need to look also at regulatory technology. We need to change our codes, and luckily, the good news is that in many places all around the country, many municipalities have been thinking about the so-called form-based codes, when just the pure land use zoning is replaced with a form-based zoning, where how the buildings shape the public space becomes central, and not what type of uses actually are within the zoning. You can see on the upper drawing an attempt to kind of summarize or to make like a section through sprawl, and you can see the different, the different sprawl elements from rural sprawl to a single family subdivision to multi-family subdivisions to commercial, shopping centers, etc., all the way to the edge city with its very high intensity of use. And these elements are very fragmented, they're not connected, and they're single-use and entirely auto-oriented. While the drawing below actually shows the complexity of human habitat in kind of a traditional environment, in traditional neighborhood. We use in the sprawl repair method is actually closely linked or kind of based on a methodology which we have been using in the past decades called the transect. And I talked briefly with one of the students this afternoon about how, and he's an environmental scientist, environmental sciences student, I believe, how basically ecologists and environmental scientists, they do sections through nature, showing basically different habitats, and how we as planners extended these sections through nature all the way through the human habitat, and basically including a kind of a continuum from pure nature through the rural places of human settlements all the way to the very urban places. So this is a kind of an ordering system, how to fit within all the elements of urban planning within some kind of ordering continuum, and being able to apply some of these principles to sprawl, which will be kind of very challenging. As you can see here, the different T-zones or transect zones on the lower drawing shows a variety of building types, a variety of things happening within these environments, while above it's only one. So there's a kind of not direct correlation. So in many cases, what we'll need to do is to upzone some of the sprawling areas, some of the to be able to include commercial uses in the single-family residential, or to introduce multi-family options in single-family residential, and residential options within commercial development, etc., etc. And then this drawing is again showing the reverse transition. Today we have what we have on the right, as Lucialis was showing, and on the left is what we need to go back to as principle. It doesn't need the architecture to be a kind of traditional type of architecture. We are very neutral about the type of architectural style. What we are very keen on are the principles behind the urban design, how whether the urbanism is walkable or it's auto-oriented. And these are the two very clear and contrasting choices. The repair at the regional scale includes several steps. Probably one of the most important things to consider is that the infrastructure, the transportation networks, the natural networks are considered as a system, as part of one whole system. Using natural boundaries as controlling sprawl is also kind of one of the main techniques used in these step-by-step regional sprawl repair method. In step one, we determine kind of the sprawl repair domain where we will be making our repair moves. This is a very probably generalized and idealized picture of sprawl, but you can recognize the sparse network of the freeway in black and in gray, the arterials, the collectors in red, lighter yellow local streets and cul-de-sacs. Actually, this drawing is a kind of wishful thinking. There's much more connectivity than sometimes we find in our sprawling communities. So basically, identifying the thoroughfare system is very important to see whether we can make the connections for future transit networks. The second step is to delineate preservation and reservation areas. Preservation are the ones which need to to stay not to be undeveloped, not developed in perpetuity, and the reservation areas are like, for example, jurisdictional wetlands or historic easements and things like that. Reservation areas are the ones which will be actually becoming part of the preservation areas, but are not yet protected. And through the method of maybe transfer of development rights or purchase of development rights, it can happen further down the line. And you can see that actually this may be challenging to some extent, because some of these greenways and some of these connected preservation areas go over sprawl. I mean, there are many places where important watershed delineations actually go through, parking lots actually go over them. So some of the repair which will be at this level, you know, daylighting creeks, daylighting important environmental features which make sense in the larger regional picture. They need to be connected. So some of the repair will be in this light. The next step is to prioritize the commercial and employment nodes. As I said, it will not be every commercial node out there in sprawl to be repaired. It's not going to be every one of them. We are a kind of an over-retailed nation. We have much more square footage of retail per capita than anywhere in the world. I believe we are twice as much as Canada, and I don't know, many times over anybody in Europe. And now is the time that probably we have too much of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had all these, you know, basically boarded boxes from the smallest to the largest. And you can see here that these arrows actually show different service areas of different types of commercial nodes, from the convenience store to convenience center, community regional centers, power centers, lifestyle centers, employment centers, etc., etc. And these actually are not to scale. You know, they are 5 miles, 1 mile, 2 mile service radii. They overlap tremendously. So we have to be very selective and choose only the ones which have the best potential, whether it will be an ownership, the ownership structure, whether it will be the location, whether it will be the potential for redevelopment on the ground from an environmental point of view. Then prioritizing the potential transit and infrastructure network is another very important step. Again, here this is an idealized situation where you can have, you know, heavy rail along the highway, for example, light rail along one of the arterials in east-west direction. Again, perpendicular to it in darker gray are the bus rapid transit, the tram in a kind of the lighter purple color, a tram or a trolley or a circulator bus which goes through the neighborhood centers. And these are the places where kind of the retrofit, the repair of the fabric will be concentrated. And this is basically where you achieve your sprawl repair targets. Then the implementation of the transfer of development rights basically achieves the continuity of the environmental areas, the preservation and reservation areas. And the final step is the assemblage of the sector map, where all these layers are basically overlaid on each other, and you see that there is a connectivity between the transportation system, and there is the logic of, you know, the larger town center, neighborhood centers, and then a kind of a regional urban core, which may happen where we have very high concentrations of employment and commercial activity. We have also developed the so-called sprawl repair assessment tool, and I'm not going to dwell too long on it, but it's also a kind of to help municipalities, to help also developers when they look at a project or look at one of these sprawling communities and see what is the potential for redevelopment, for sprawl repair. First, whether there is a chance to restore the neighborhood structure. This is one of the biggest challenges, actually, because of the lack of connectivity of thoroughfares. To restore a neighborhood structure, to make something walkable within some of our sprawling residential communities, for example, is very challenging. So this is one thing to think about. Viable infrastructure and utilities is another. Environmental performance, basically how these how these developments will relate to existing environmental resources, and whether they're in the way of some larger regional, for example, watershed restoration or not, whether the housing stock is robust or is really in very bad shape, and the overall financial viability. And of course, the score can be, if it's 3 or more, yes, it will be worth trying to evolve this place into neighborhood centers, town centers, or regional urban cores, or it will be a kind of a devolution choice. We will leave them as they are, then there will be, kind of the sprawling areas will be what they are, or we will be replacing them with agricultural land, or they will be reverting to open space. Of course, this in case when there is a high percentage of foreclosures and abandonment and crimes moving, etc., etc. The next level, I forgot to say that the sprawl repair method kind of works in all planning scales, starting from the region and then goes to the community scale, when I will march through a bunch of the idiosyncratic sprawl repair types, which are important enough that they can actually affect the community around. That's why we call them the community scale. They can become neighborhood centers, they can become town centers. And then the last two scales, one is the scale of the block, where you can make interventions on the small scale, and all the way down to the single block in the building, where the interventions can be done with much less investment, with much smaller redevelopment efforts. I will start with actually the single-family subdivision, which is probably kind of the most controversial one. The single-family subdivision, usually has a very strong homeowners association, and without them being a kind of the main proponents of any kind of repair, without people to be behind them, these are strong governments. The homeowners associations are very strong governments, kind of local governments, and they decide many things. Without them being on board, nothing of this sort can happen. But these drawings are really quite kind of polemical and radical, to some extent very ambitious. How we can take a single-family neighborhood and make it really a kind of in a neighborhood which will become a neighborhood center for a larger suburban area. You can see that the 5-minute walk in the drawing to the left doesn't encompass the whole neighborhood. Usually these suburban enclaves are larger in size because walkability was not a kind of a main planning tool when they were planned, and that's why it's a kind of a challenge. It will be always bigger. Some edges of these neighborhoods will not be that close, unless we become more European and kind of walk more than 5 minutes, but 7 to 10 minutes. But of course, if we create actually interesting destinations, interesting anchors for people to walk to, it is possible. In this particular case, we're showing a school in the upper right corner. There's a school, and you will see where the center will be happening as the collector road in the lower end of the drawing. So one of the techniques is to create a kind of a spine of slightly higher density, which connects the two points of interest, the two destinations. The overall objective for these types of developments is to kind of rebalance their overall structure, to introduce new building types, because they have only one single family building type, to also connect as much as possible. We know it's difficult sometimes. Some of the cul-de-sacs are done with some environmental reason, there are wetlands or some features. In most cases, the cul-de-sacs have become kind of the default urban design tool for planners. Put cul-de-sacs, and then the community seems very safe for children. So connectivity, connecting the cul-de-sacs will be another big challenge. Connecting to the collector, introducing office buildings, and even making some of the houses, some of the McMansions, converting some of multifamily, especially the ones which are on the edges with the new neighborhood center. And you can see here, this is the existing repetitive pattern of single-family houses and cul-de-sacs, and how it can be actually converted or repaired into a neighborhood which has a main public space. It has a bus stop. It has a very different attitude towards the collector road on the edge. We're making out of the collector, we're making a boulevard with access lanes. So it's basically a new frontage on this, kind of highly trafficked street, but also, the square has a relationship to on the other side of the collector where some further development can happen. Here I will show you, just for this sprawl repair type, I will show you the step-by-step design algorithms or design techniques. First, we look at the deficiencies, the single building type, which needs to be rebalanced. Then the second diagram shows the lack of walkable blocks. And then the third one is the residual open space, which needs to be rebalanced, and how basically these are the steps going through the different deficiencies, introduce new building types and mixed use, adding townhouses, live-work units, office space, multifamily units to create a kind of multiple choices for these new generations. Connect and repair the thoroughfares, as I said, connecting some cul-de-sacs. Also looking at the existing thoroughfares and making them a little bit more pedestrian-friendly, whether it's with medians, creating sidewalks, bicycle lanes, or landscape, or things like that. Kind of the livable streets, the strategies for streetscape. Define open and civic space in places where the space was only residual, kind of behind in the backyard, to try to make sense of some public space, gathering space, more symbolic and also of social important function. Also, one thing which many suburban communities can benefit from is to integrate local food production within these neighborhoods, whether it's in the own lot of the personal the scale of a single lot, or it's kind of the space in between lots. They can create community gardens, or even in public spaces. Some allotments can be assigned. So this is something which kind of today with urban agriculture or agrarian urbanism and all these things kind of becoming very popular. This is something to explore, and suburban communities actually have a good chance because in many cases they're very close to agricultural land, but they have never taken advantage in their physical form to be better connected to such activity. The rezoning, which I briefly spoke about, there is a sharp contrast between the conventional zoning on the left side, the single building type, and then a kind of the much more complex, finely grained zoning on the right, where different building types are allowed within zones, and basically the use within these zones is not that dramatic. Actually, in some cases it can be interchangeable. Townhouses can be live-work units can be only townhouses in some form, depending on the market and the shifts of the market. So this flexibility actually will be very helpful within the process of sprawl repair. If kind of the final outcome looks very drastic, we can explore different phasing opportunities. In much smaller steps. For example, here you can see that only a very kind of primary beginning of a small civic space can be achieved with probably the acquisition of several houses, and then it can grow if things go well, if it's well accepted, or if it economically it is well grounded, and then kind of the final long-term repair. This is just one example of how suburban fabric can be reweaved and infilled, and I wanted to show this as an example because this is suburban redevelopment in the fringes of St. Louis, and what happened there is because they had already kind of a sprawl repair plan in place, including a new code, form-based code, a new regulating plan where they wanted to see things happening in their very highly suburbanized towns. They received, actually, they were instrumental, their leadership was very instrumental in receiving some stimulus money for some of the realignments of roads. There was, they were very successful in getting some money and realign their roads and follow up with this for very aggressively. This is another thing which we pursued in the sprawl repair manual is not only design and regulation, but also how you will implement these things. And these are the steps for developers. These are practical steps for developers, for builders, municipalities also, which are interested in redevelopment of, in this particular case, the single-family subdivision. But these implementation protocols exist for all the other types, and basically starting from the larger regional context, that you can never do something without understanding the larger picture. And if a project actually can be proven to be really beneficial for the bigger regional context, actually it will be more easily procured, more easily approved, and more easily implemented. And these are basically the steps which need to be taken. Transformation of multifamily subdivision, and I'm marching here through a lot of these. Multifamily subdivisions actually are quite challenging. You can see here that the so-called garden apartments usually are dispersed on structures, disposition of buildings, big parking lots. So just imagine that such developments can be repaired is really quite radical and polemical in some cases. But we think that when there are developments like this on important intersections, they can become transit-oriented town centers. Again, we have to look at the bigger picture and where these places are located. You can see that this is a radical intervention. Many of the older apartments are taken away and replaced by new construction. So some of them are still preserved. This is a kind of zoom-in where there is a lake in the one of the corners of the development, where the buildings were only kind of giving their backyards, or they were private. It was like a privatized amenity, and how you can transform the private lake into a community amenity with the main street actually leading all the way to the lake. Transformation of the shopping center into a town center. The shopping center is a kind of a generic term for a group of commercial buildings that are developed or managed by one entity, and usually there are many features which are similar for shopping centers all around the country. There are many different classifications by the ULI or the International Shopping Centers Association, or whatever it was. There is a huge range, as I said, from the kind of a corner store all the way to a lifestyle center in the millions of square feet. But this is a kind of a generic shopping center on several corners, and what you can do with, in case that you want to preserve the big boxes, some of them may be preserved as retail establishments, some of them can be converted into civic buildings, such as either university satellites, in some cases senior centers, daycare centers, schools. All these suburban communities, sprawl developments, are starved for a kind of civic amenities. So some of these buildings can be converted into that, into such uses. Stores are usually very valuable components of neighborhoods and cities, but when they're embedded in good fabric, actually storefronts are probably the most interesting streetscapes for pedestrians. You walk by the street, and until recently, shopping actually has been our greatest entertainment. I don't know whether recently this is the case with the economic crisis, but till recently this has been a kind of a very important placemaking tool. However, with this whenever there are high concentrations of commercial activities and not embedded in walkable fabric, basically everything is reached by the automobile, and we know the outcome, a lot of waste of energy and resources, etc. So this is again one of these provocative solutions where the dangerous big intersection is resolved as a calm-down square, more pedestrian-friendly. Basically the traffic is resolved, but also the pedestrian quality of the environment is also resolved. There is somewhat of a retail loop which reaches to the big boxes, whether they remain as retail or civic uses, doesn't matter. You can see other building types, live-work units as incubator, also liner buildings as incubating new businesses are a very important technique. We will need a lot of cheap space for future businesses, for future entrepreneurs in the repair of sprawl. This is an interesting example of gradual urbanization of highway-facing strip shopping centers. We have, hundreds, if not thousands, of these all around the country. And this is an example how you can basically take some drive-throughs and big boxes and reurbanizing them slowly. The first phase, you can start with a main street which runs parallel to the highway. On the left, some of the drive-throughs actually are incorporated into the main street. They're still visible from the highway, so the IHOPs and the Dunkin' Donuts and the McDonald's, they still can survive as they are, but they have a liner in the front. Their main entrance is from the parking lot. And you see that the big boxes are still preserved. In the second phase, one of the big boxes is already urbanized with mixed-use, larger perimeter blocks. So you can see that actually structured parking will be necessary. In many of these sprawl repair case studies, the redevelopment of parking lots with garages will be necessary because we'll need kind of the more compact urbanism. And then the last basically phase is when the drive-throughs basically have lived their short lifespan. Usually it's 7 to 15 years at the most, actually, for these types of establishments. And then you have a full reurbanization of this strip shopping center. And you can see here like an illustration how it looks from the highway when you have the parallel highway, and then you have the drive-through establishments with their visibility from the highway, and then the main street with the big boxes still intact. Transformation of a shopping mall into a town center. The shopping mall is one of the most promising contenders for sprawl repair. Because of their location, the parcel size, usually they occupy a lot of acreage. The ownership structure, they provide a lot of opportunities for repair. I just received an email like 10 minutes ago about there was an announcement on news release that Simon Properties will be investing starting in the next year or so, investing $1.6 billion in redevelopment of their existing stock of malls. So this is great news. This means that some of the big players have started thinking how to redevelop these places. The other big player, which was the General Growth Properties, they went bankrupt a couple of years ago. But prior to that, they have started already a strategy, for all of their dying or already dead malls, and how to redevelop them into town centers, mixed-use quality. There are two strategies for mall redevelopment, one can be a kind of a forward-thinking, a visionary sprawl repair when the mall is still well-functioning, and I will show you later. There is one example, or a few examples around the country when the mall is still doing very well and it's embedded in a proactive way within a mixed-use fabric. And the other one, when the mall is dead, the retroactive strategy. Usually malls affect large portions of real estate around them. They are associated with shopping center or office parks around them, and when a mall goes down, probably a vast all the shopping centers, all these things around it actually go down with it. And when the shopping center is doing, I mean, the mall is doing well, then basically all the neighborhoods, all the areas around are doing well. So it is important actually to look at the mall within its context as well. In this particular case, you can see that the mall with its surrounding kind of close vicinity is probably about 800, 900 acres. This is just a small town can fit there. You can see the 5-minute walking pedestrian sheds, you know, we have 4 of them and one big one, with the center in the middle. The big one is the 10-minute walking pedestrian shed, which is centered on a light rail stop. This is actually this typical case study was modeled after an existing mall outside Atlanta. Actually, I forgot to say that most of these sprawl types and their repair were extracted from real places. They are not kind of invented. Some of them may seem a little bit cleaned up or more diagrammatic, but they are quite dismal, but they are real places in sprawling communities. Such places, you know, some very strong incentives will be needed for such big redevelopment. You know, these are big investments, so there will be a lot of things, a lot of implementation strategies which developers and municipalities will need to negotiate. And some of the best projects actually can be achieved with public-private partnerships, where new codes are basically worked out, and different kind of alleviated permitting processes are put into place. You know, higher density or mixed uses are allowed, vested within the new regulatory documents. You know, tax increment financing, business, the BIDs, whatever it was, the business. I'm forgetting what the BID was. Steve told me today about the business incentive district or whatever it is. Here, the megastructure, I will show you several different ways of megastructure of a mall being repaired. One is when the megastructure is kind of embedded in new fabric. You can see that there was a driveway, a circular loop around the mall, and this is fairly typical. You know, there is a big loop around it, you know, kind of to distribute the circulation around the parking lot. And in parallel to it, we are showing a canal, which can be not only a stormwater facility used for stormwater runoff, but it also can become an interesting community amenity. You can see here, you know, kind of polemical proposal that the roof, you know, the structure is preserved, the roof is becoming green roof. Whether this is possible, it has to be investigated. And then the infill with the high density perimeter blocks with parking structures, and with the residential office space, workplace, etc., to rebalance kind of the hundreds and thousands of square feet of retail in case that the mall is still functioning. Another way of thinking about it is to keep some of the anchors, because they're usually the best structural elements within a mall. Maybe some of them can be converted, whether it will be into a meeting hall or a senior center, as I said before, or a daycare or a library. And then to create a main street between. You can see that there is a kind of a street in between the two east-west oriented anchors, and then there are some other streets which are going into the main street, basically feeding the main street. Another repair strategy, which is kind of the third one, which is the devolution of the mall into an agricultural village, is probably kind of the most strange one, but this is not impossible in places where basically there is a population drop, and where the population is expected to drop, and maybe some of these malls can be devolved into smaller villages with smaller density, maybe townhouses, smaller houses with gardens in the back. You can see some larger agricultural lots on the periphery. The interesting thing about this one is that you can see the big public space in the middle, the big green. Actually, it is the precise dimension of Piazza del Campo in Siena, Italy. Actually, it fits perfectly well in the food court of the mall. So this was a kind of an interesting planning exercise. Transformation of business park into a town center. There are some interesting synergies in office parks which can be taken advantage of. There are retail experts who say that probably 200 square feet of retail office space can support 5 square feet of restaurants and 4 square feet of retail. So basically, restaurants, retail can coexist very well with office parks. Of course, it's balanced well with the residential uses as well. You can see here the dispersed building and parking layout, and how an office park can be repaired into a transit-oriented town center. This is an example of an environmental type of urbanism, which not only incorporates the green architecture with the green roofs and solar panels and sound walls and wind turbines and all of that, but also an environmental type of urbanism, which is a kind of a medieval, more fluid, more organic type of shapes, which are ideally suited for better air circulation and natural ventilation. The Edge City, I'm not going to dwell too long on it because I think I'm running out of time. The Edge City, of course, it is just one word or two. It's one of the most difficult contenders for repair because there are great big concentrations of commercial space. In some cases, lodging hotels. In some cases, condominiums. So all the elements are there to make a great place, but at the end, it's just they're so far away from each other. There is no pedestrian quality to it. So it will be very hard to retrofit such places. And Tyson's Corner is one example. This actually happens to be a portion of Tyson's Corner, just a tiny little bit. So we'll see how Tyson's Corner, with their very ambitious program for the Edge City retrofit, will be implemented. This is one Edge City, so-called Edge City, which is repaired into regional urban core. This happens to be in Miami-Dade County. There is a mall right there, which is the Miami, called the Dade Mall. And when this project was done, it was a very well-doing mall, and it's still kind of faring quite well. But the proposal was that we embed the mall into new fabric. Already there were a lot of big office buildings, so there was a kind of a concentration needed. But what was needed was the residential component to rebalance this place and to make it a kind of a multimodal and transit-oriented development. Transformation of a suburban campus into traditional urban campus. I think this is an important one. We are right now here in this fairly grand building, and this campus of yours, which is, I may say, kind of kind of more recent generations of campuses. But it used to be that the American university campus actually was built in a different manner, usually with a college town next to it. It's very much more integrated with other uses or with other things around it, or with a structure which was a little bit better oriented towards a pedestrian environment. You know, usually commuter campuses have more, pay a lot of attention to parking lots and where the cars go, but not so much to kind of the pedestrian environment. And this is an example of such a kind of a post-war commuter type of campus, which can be actually recovered and brought to the level of the campuses when kind of the American planning tradition was most proud of the campuses. The classical American campus is probably the most important contribution of American planning to the history of planning. So here it is. You can see that the buildings are fairly dispersed. There is maybe a remnant of axial relationships, which was very strong actually with the universities, of Thomas Jefferson or Frederick Olmsted, in the Stanford University of Virginia. Kind of, the axial relationships are very strong with some of the big buildings, kind of very central on the campus. And then, even though the campuses consisted of freestanding buildings, they were connected either with arcades, very similar to your composition around here, with the arcade or with landscaping or with balustrades or with other elements. So the proposal is that you differentiate, you basically define kind of the newly found axial relationships and kind of creating the principal axis, recreating the principal axis visually and physically by connecting the buildings, the freestanding buildings, with new construction, with arcades, landscaping, etc. In some cases, even organic gardens and local food production can be part of the campus. And there are many places around the country where colleges and universities are doing this. Another very interesting case study is the transformation of underutilized golf course. Recently, till very recent actually, the golf course was a kind of really the true amenity of our sprawling communities. The golf course with the suburban, with the residential development around it was very symbolic of the success of suburban America. However, in recent years, and in the past probably 3 years, there are hundreds of golf courses which have been closed due to economic conditions, environmental concerns, etc., economic insolvency in most cases, rising land prices. So it wasn't in some places, of course, not before the crisis, but there are many golf courses which are kind of remaining fallow. Though this drawing actually shows the golf course in a pretty good shape, at some point, if it's not used, this land becomes fallow, the park becomes probably even dangerous. And even if these people around are accustomed to their long views through the golf course, maybe redevelopment into a kind of a mixed-use center may be one of the solutions. Usually the golf courses are polluted, and they're environmentally not the best unless there are some organic types. But they have very high levels of arsenic in the soil. So what needs to be done is to have a landfill, and this landfill can come out of canals or lakes which are basically dug out either on the border, on the boundaries, which will appease to some extent the residential neighbors around, and then it can be used as stormwater runoff and also as a civic amenity. Repair of thoroughfares, obviously this is an obvious technique, making the thoroughfares complete streets, and I'm not going to dwell too long on these. Obviously, a freeway can be transformed in certain things if a freeway is cutting through a residential neighborhood, or if it is already urbanized with commercial sprawl development along it. So maybe looking into making from a freeway a parkway or a boulevard with medians, with transportation corridors in between is not impossible, and has been done in some places around the country, as well as intersections of different sorts. When you have a big freeway interchange, it can become DuPont circle of some sort, urbanizing its edges. Arterials transformed into boulevards and avenues. And of course, the classic cul-de-sac transformation, which here is shown in two interpretations. One is kind of more conservative, with a green close in the middle, with probably just some pedestrian and bicycle connections, using a small easement between lots to create some connectivity with the other cul-de-sac. And then another one, which is by acquiring one property on the upper corner, then you can puncture a street through the cul-de-sac, and this way connect larger areas. This is a collector repair into a kind of a phasing of a collector repair that you can start only with your streetscape, and then this will invite basically later real estate development, kind of the vertical development can come later. You start with the medians, the sidewalks, the parallel parking, coming down the street, making it of a different character. The repair at block scale, as I said, we're operating at all scales. There are different mega blocks in suburbia, which you can achieve different technologies. For example, this happens to be a commercial mega block, and how you basically introduce new streets and new development of smaller and larger scale, public space, and privatizing actually some of the parking lots, or intensifying the use. This is an interesting one: transformation of a slab and tower mega block into walkable urban fabric. A case study which it can be used in many cases, many cities. The slab and tower mega blocks are a kind of inheritance from the urban renewal era. They are very predominant in Western and Eastern Europe as well. So there are vast unassigned spaces, whether it's parking or just leftover, lightly landscaped or even unlandscaped land. So how you embed the slabs and towers within urban fabric is shown here. Again, this kind of no man's land, it is better for it to be probably assigned, and a kind of private ownership introduced at a smaller scale, live-work units, 3-story, 3-4-story, maybe apartment units, some civic buildings, kind of to make a small urban infill out as a block. Densification of McMansion block by infilling with townhouses. This can sound also fairly contradictory. How is it possible to even imagine a block of McMansions in suburbia infilled with anything else? It wouldn't have been possible if we haven't seen many foreclosed properties, many properties abandoned. So it is possible that this can happen. This is a typical block, and then intensification with townhouses in the back. This historically has happened in Boston, for example, in different times actually, when the prices went really high. Many McMansions were turned into multifamily, and townhouses were built in the back blocks of the. And the land was so expensive that they could even park underground. Here the proposal is with surface parking, but with some interventions. This is not impossible. Some interventions like this can happen if somebody buys one block. It will be difficult from a rezoning point of view, because this will be kind of a sporadic, small interventions, and how they will fit in the bigger picture. This will be interesting to see. This is introduction of apartment villas, infill with apartment villas. Then densification of just a residential block. Usually residential lots in suburbia are fairly deep, so puncturing of an alley is not absolutely out of the question. Of course, if there is homeowners association and property owners agreement to do that. But if people are allowed to build outbuildings, to have small apartments above their garages, for example, build like secondary units in their backyards. You see that they're in their backyards, they're like secondary units, whether they're rentals or just additional living space. Maybe they will think otherwise. So all of these tools need to be made available to our suburban communities, for people to choose from if they wish to do that. And again, the shrinking city phenomenon, residential block de-densification, when people basically abandon their houses. Places, as I mentioned, Michigan and Ohio have experimented with these, and these are similar strategies where several lots are replatted into larger family compounds. And with agricultural basically use allowed on their lots, or in some cases, clustered several lots clustered in one space, forming a stormwater retention green or kind of a community garden for common use, as in the last drawing. So this is a typical suburban residential block. This is how it's basically agricultural lots and family compounds outcome. And then another outcome with a city green with a community garden on one side. And then the final scale is at the building scale. We wanted also to offer remediation techniques to retrofit a kind of the primary building prototypes as defined suburbia. Some of these interventions are more ambitious and some of them are more modest, but we wanted to show that certain things can be done at the smallest scale of planning. A McMansion, for example, in this case, the McMansion is, I don't remember, 5 bedrooms and three garage structures. Actually, this is based on an actual structure, and it's structurally absolutely sound, and it is possible to achieve that. It is transformed into a multi-family or student and senior housing. The second pair of drawings shows how this 5-bedroom mansion is converted into a 9-bedroom senior housing, plus 9-bedroom and 9 bathrooms, plus a little suite for the caregiver. And the example below is basically 2 apartments on the ground floor and 2 apartments above. So these are ideas which may become helpful at some point or another. Suburban ranch house, and how you deal with these extensive setbacks, in some cases allowing a duplex or a secondary unit, kind of in a form of a flag lot, to happen behind the primary dwelling. So this is not impossible. And then another one is when you deal with the front setback. You can see in the upper left corner is the existing condition, and then different types of infills along the very deep suburban setback. Why ask people to expand their houses in the back, where they can do, basically useful gardening or something else, or put a pool or whatever, and not expand in the front, where it's usually the front setback is totally kind of wasted. So it can be a 2-story addition. It can be 1-story addition, a big work unit, or additional bedroom, or a rental unit in some cases. A drive-through, as I showed you in some previous examples, a drive-through can be lined with a kind of the beginning of a main street, which I showed you in a larger context, a gas station, which is, we call this type kind of a reverse gas station, where you can keep the existing pumps, you can keep the little store, which usually happens kind of in the back, and then you can build on the corner, or you can, and later on redevelop the site, and basically this becomes the beginning of a main street or more walkable environment. A strip center, where a building, which is a kind of the usual big box development, surrounded by parking lots, can be converted into a recycling center. In this particular case, this was just the idea that such a dead box actually can become something useful with some green roofs or green technology if you want. It can go without them, of course, reorganizing the parking, making a courtyard in the front where the recycling, people will talk about their recycling ambitions, and also, a coffee shop or anything else can happen within this building. So basically, these are some of the main building types. There are some more, of course, which you can look up. And as I said before, all of these probably are not going to be able to happen today because our codes do not allow that. We have created a sprawl repair module, which actually works today with a kind of our version of a form-based code, the so-called smart code. But this sprawl repair module actually can be used for other form-based codes, and it gives the techniques and then the incentives of how the sprawl types can be converted into repair types. For example, here, if we zoom in, the single-family subdivision, multi-family subdivision, and shopping center, how do you rebalance and what types of uses and building types you need to make a kind of traditional neighborhood developments or regional centers repaired types of a new environment. And this is my last slide. And thank you very much for your attention. You were very patient and very kind to endure this long presentation. Thank you very much.
Question and answer, 5 or 10.
Yes, if you have any questions, please. Yes?
Yes. I noticed that a lot of the proposals use this perimeter block development style, which I actually like a lot, but I couldn't help but notice that the resulting space in the middle of the block is almost always used for parking, automobile storage. And while I understand that in a transitional sense, do you think since these communities are designed to utilize connected by transit, that the highest and best use of those spaces can evolve to something more meaningful in the long term?
Actually, this is an excellent question, and probably we overdid it with the perimeter blocks and with the parking garages. This building type actually has been built all around the country, and there are many projects in Texas, especially for some reason, Atlanta as well. It has been used. Usually a parking garage serves 2 blocks. So if we have, in this case, when it's a mall, probably it will be almost every block because of the high intensity of usage. If the mall is still functioning, they will need their parking spots, and if you put, more office space and residential on top of it, probably almost every block will require a parking garage. We have been asked this question many times, and that's very correct to us. If in the future, in a much better environment, we'll have, kind of the transit connectivity, which we are planning for, what will happen with these garages? There is a strategy for that. They can be designed in a way that they can be converted, either converted into residential lofts or kind of transitional live-work space. This can be achieved actually if the initial design is started like that, instead of with a kind of the slanted, sloped slabs. Basically, you will need horizontal slabs as well as a little bit higher ceiling height. Usually the garages are very kind of with low floor to ceiling height. So if they are designed preconceived, with this vision that at some point they will be converted, this is possible. We have been even talking about creating on some cases, state level or regional level incentives for building garages, because today in this environment, who will be the developer who will go again and say, oh, I'm going to build, garages and I'm going to build this high density. So we were thinking that garages actually have to be considered as part of the, transit infrastructure. If you think about them like that, that basically you can actually give them some incentives. Whether there's stimulus money, maybe it will be money better spent for parking garages close to important nodes, with the potential for transit-oriented development than expanding highways, for example.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, there is one person.
Yes. Was there any funding support for some of this work? Outside funding or grants or any research, or is it?
Well, in many cases, there is. There are many ways to do that. There are several, not several, probably scores of projects, retrofitting projects around the country which have been realized. They're out of the ground, they have been built. So yes, there are definitely a whole range of implementation incentives. Like, for example, the project which I showed you in Kendall, it's almost entirely built. I showed just the renderings, the kind of the visionary drawing, the transit-oriented development around the mall. There were many incentives, like a very short permitting process, for example, was one. Vested high density was another one. Another one was the codes which were in place for this particular area were expediting the whole process in a much faster way. They were basically doing what they had without any public process, but only as administrative, basically expediting administratively all of these things. And of course, as I said before, the BIDs and the TIP programs and all of that, and many others. There are some grants which actually can be redirected to sprawl repair, whether they're CDBG money or, but actually, creating public-private partnerships will be a good way to make this happen, to realize projects like this.
The last question.
Earlier in your presentation, you gave examples of the first ring, second ring suburban areas. and you pointed out some areas that should be preserved or emulated. What do you do in a community where what the community is doing along a transit corridor, where you do have denser development, they're actually taking away those denser areas that could be emulated and favoring sprawl that goes deeper away from those corridors?
As I said before, probably we'll have to do both, you know, with the kind of the demographic predictions. We will not be able to only do one or the other. Our strategy will have to be in all directions, you know, in the urban areas, in the urban cores, of course. And there are many, you know, current success stories where such places have been redeveloped and are moving towards a kind of a great renaissance. But we cannot actually desert the sprawling areas at all, because 2/3 of these 100 million people actually are predicted that they will be living and working in the second and third tier of the suburbs. So basically, we cannot just say no. It will be we will be only investing in the good parts, and then the bad parts will leave them alone. Because basically, most of the businesses, there is a great decentralization of the businesses in this country. You know, most of them, very large percent, I believe it's higher than 60%, is in the suburbs, or at least in the past decade or so, the new businesses, even higher, much higher percentages, maybe in the 90%, have been developed in the suburbs and the exurbs. And because people, you know, hundreds of thousands of people work there, they basically will need housing, will need all the amenities. And instead of doing, you know, some of these reverse commutes, it's better to infill where the need is.
Thanks very much. Join us at the table for personalized plans. Were there any other closing formalities? Chris Franklin, thank you so much for your coordination, leadership, GPSA, all the good work, students, faculty, thank you very much.